Welcome to Boobs Aren't Worth Dying For, the podcast dedicated to integrative health and healing from breast cancer and breast cancer treatment using the best of conventional and natural medicine. Your host, Deborah Beaumont, is an advanced practice nurse, functional medicine practitioner, and fellow breast cancer survivor.
Welcome to today's episode of Boobs Aren't Worth Dying For. My name is Deborah Beaumont. I'm your host. I'm a functional medicine practitioner, I'm an advanced practice nurse, and I'm a breast cancer survivor. Today's episode is definitely something that every woman needs to listen to. If you have breast, you need to know the information that we're presenting today on the episode. Dr. Nancy Cappello is an activist. She is an advocate and a voice for women's health. If there's ever a time when legislation around women's health is important, it's in this issue that she is so passionate about, which is breast density. She has been a leading voice in getting legislation passed in 35 states that legislates the fact that doctors need to tell women what their breast density is. It is a piece of information every woman needs to know and has profound implications for your health. Dr. Cappello actually became the unlikely activist through her own experience, which she will talk to you about today. Nancy Cappello is a PhD. She's the director and founder of RU Dense and RU Dense Advocacy, with a mission to educate the public about the risk and screening challenges of dense breast tissue to prevent missed, delayed, and advanced stage cancer. She is the inspiration, and I mean that truly, the inspiration behind Connecticut's first-in-the-nation density reporting law passed in 2009, making the state a global leader in density reporting, adjunct screening, and the density reporting grassroots movement. 35 states have now enacted density reporting laws, and a federal bill in both the House and the Senate was introduced October 15th of 2017. Dr. Cappello has presented her inspiring story of patient turned advocate across the United States and the scientific forums in Rome, Tokyo, Paris, Puerto Rico, and Brisbane, Australia. Obviously, she's got a big message that's really needed. Her blog is Nancy's Chalkboard, which has been published by the Huffington Post and other media. She is the recipient of numerous honors and awards, including being named a health hero by Parade magazine, honored by the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame, and received prestigious national awards. I love this piece. When her mission is finished, and I hope interspersed in her mission, she looks forward to rescuing dogs, learning Italian, and taking golf lessons.
There you go.
Quite an introduction and quite a resume. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Cappello. And I really think the best way to start this is just to have you tell us your story, because it's quite compelling in its own right.
Well, thanks, Deborah, for having me. And I love the radical health RN.
Yes.
You are.
We need a new framework, that's for sure.
It's so crazy when I think about this. And I was diagnosed 14 years ago, so this is no overnight success. I've been relentless in my health for years. I followed the lead of my mother and her sister, my aunts, and had my mammogram every year beginning. I had a baseline actually at 35, and then I had my yearly mammograms from 40. Until I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I still have my mammograms, but I'll tell you that later. But until I was diagnosed with breast cancer at age, I just turned 51. And so, again, I was pretty health conscious. Certainly wasn't in the health field. As you can tell from my resume, I was a teacher and I was a school administrator, and then I worked at the State Department of Education, taught on the college level. So I had a pretty illustrious career as an educator. And I basically stumbled or hit a wall in 2004. I had just had a mammogram, my 11th. I had it at the end of November 2003. And seeing that I just turned 51, my plan was, after my husband and I, in early January, we were away for a little vacation. I was going to make my appointment for my colonoscopy because, again, very health conscious. And exercise, by the way, daily. And so about 3 weeks after my normal mammogram, I had a gynecological appointment with my primary care physician, my gynecologist. And as she was doing a breast exam, feeling my right breast, she felt what she said, a thickening in my breast. She called it a ridge or a thickening. She said, I know, Nancy, you just had a normal mammogram, but because there's a I feel something, I'm going to send you for a diagnostic mammogram. Maybe 3 days later, I went for and again, Deborah, not worried about this. First of all, I never missed a mammogram. I just got my 11th report, said, "Dear Miss Cappello, we are pleased to inform you the results are normal." So I just figured, women get called back. That was the first time I was ever called back in my 11 years of mammograms. And so I go for my diagnostic mammogram, which is basically targeted in the area of my right breast, the upper quadrant, that she felt something. It was fine. It was normal. But because it was palpable and the doctor felt it, the standard of practice is that I went across the hall to an ultrasound suite, and I had a technologist just putting the ultrasound targeting it in the area of the palpable, quote unquote, ridge. Before you know it, this technologist said, "Excuse me," and she came back with 3 other people hovering over me saying things like, "Yeah, what's this? Oh, is it on the mammogram? No, we couldn't see it." Well, lo and behold, fast forward, my cancer was diagnosed at stage 3C. There's 4 stages of breast cancer. It was on the last stage before it metastasized to other organs, which is a chronic, as you know, terminal disease.
Right.
It had metastasized to 13 lymph nodes.
Oh, my God.
Not what you want. When you look at who lives and who dies, you look at a couple of things. One, the size of the cancer, the stage of the cancer, and the lymph node involvement.
Right.
I was in pretty bad shape. And so, again, I'm not in the profession.
I just have to say, not being in the profession and having 4 to 5 technicians come in, stare at a screen that's pointed at your body, saying, what's this?
Yeah. One was a doctor, by the way, radiologist.
Talk about not attending to your emotional needs. You're just like, oh my God.
I'm looking at him saying, "He's pretty cute, but I don't think this is going to be good news." Anyway,
not good enough.
Fast forward, they sent me for a biopsy, and I had a single mastectomy, had 6 surgeries since then, chemotherapy, radiation. But let me get back to the story about what happened. When I met with my breast surgeon after the biopsy, I said to her, I don't get this. I had my normal mammogram report, dear Miss Cappello. And she said to me in a nonchalant manner, pass the salt. She said, "Oh, you have dense breast tissue." No, I'm an educator. I have my pad, my pen. I'm writing down dense tissue. What's that? "Oh, it's hard for cancer to be seen on a mammogram." Now, again, I know nothing about the research about dense tissue, about breast cancer. I'm just a regular old patient, trying to keep healthy. I said, "Well, what do you mean it's hard for cancer to be seen on a mammogram if you have dense tissue?" She said, "Yeah, you kind of have what's called like young breasts." I said, "Well, shouldn't I know this?" She said, "Oh, no, we don't tell women that." Now, again, she's a female. So I had 5 other doctors. I had a team of doctors, and I asked each doctor what happened, and each of them told me same thing on a separate day, same response. "Oh, you have dense tissue, Nancy." And explained to me how hard it is for mammogram to see cancer. And my next question is, should I know this? And each of them said, male and females, "No, we don't tell women that." Well, you're telling me now.
But the thing is, they knew it. This
was
known information to them.
Yes.
It's like, it sounds like they treated it like it was just like, well, you have blonde hair. It was just like a routine thing that they knew, but had never informed you.
And again, so now I have, I'm trying to survive this disease. I find out at stage 3C. I go to the stage of diagnosis, American Cancer Society. It says that less than 49% of women survive 5 years. Can you believe this?
Oh, my God.
I never missed a damn mammogram. I was outraged. When I tell you, first of all, I was scared. Am I going to live or die? And it looked like I was going to die. I never missed an appointment. I followed all the rules. I was like in the best of health, other than having a late stage disease. And when I had my I chose to have a single mastectomy. So I still have a good breast, which is an important aspect when you think about, I'm still a consumer of screening. Right. And I'll talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely.
And so when I had my 3 weeks off for my single mastectomy, I wasn't satisfied with the information that my doctors were telling me about my dense tissue. And so I went to the literature in 2004. And what I uncovered absolutely made me outraged. At the time, now this is 14 years ago, I uncovered study after study about the masking, how hard it is to see cancer on a mammogram when you have dense tissue, because dense tissue appears white on a mammogram, and so does the cancer. So you can't see the contrast when you're looking at it on the X-ray. So that certainly was unbelievable to me. That's called the masking. In addition to that, in fact, I read a study from the first randomized controlled trial of mammography in the 60s that talked about that having dense breast tissue is also a risk factor for breast cancer. So I'm finding out after my single mastectomy that this information, while unknown to me, the patient who had it, and its impact on whether I'm going to live or die, I could not believe that there was research, science. And the science told me that 40% of women have dense tissue. So, Deborah, I knew, oh my God, I'm not alone.
Right.
What about my sister? What about my mother? She's going for mammograms still at the time. What about my friends my colleagues at the State Department where I work? They probably have dense tissue. They don't even know, and they're counting on their mammogram, which everybody says, get your mammogram, early detection, get your mammogram, which can be a fatal flaw, or is a fatal flaw, I believe, in screening. And so I get all this information about dense tissue. I take all the literature that I had to pay for to download, to make copies of, and I put it in packets to my 6 docs, thinking,
Wow.
How silly of me, thinking, oh, they don't know this. I'm going to teach them because I'm a teacher, and I'm going to tell them, here's the information I uncovered, and what I want you to do is in our little community of Woodbury, Connecticut, I want you to start telling women in the greater Waterbury area that if they have dense tissue, since it's already in a report, I found out it was in my report that I never saw, that my radiologist wrote to my referring physician. I had 11 reports that said I had dense tissue, extremely dense tissue, by the way, and nobody bothered to tell me. So after I gave them the information about research and I asked them, could you start telling women now about this? And each of them said to me separately, oh no, Nancy, we can't do that. It's not the standard of care.
Oh my God.
So I said it to myself, it's not the standard of careless. I call it health careless. Here I am, 51 years old, never missed an appointment, followed every rule, American Cancer Society, Susan G. Komen, do what you could do to keep healthy, have your yearly mammogram. And I was at really great risk. I still am at risk, Deborah, of dying from this disease. And I was ticked.
Oh my God.
I could not believe it. So what do you do, right? What do I do? Do I just say, well, like they said, you miss a few? No, you miss a lot. You miss every other cancer in a dense breast. So I started studying the research. My husband, Joe, said to me, Nancy, it's a family disease. He was devastated. Yeah. Couldn't believe it. Thought this was outrageous. What an injustice. What are they crazy? They think you're going to just say, oh, okay, see you later? You can die from this. And no one really cared. This is how we felt. We were alone in my own, cancer journey, and my healthcare providers who should care that this is going to affect women coming after me. And so Joe said to me, we can't stop this. And this is right out of the gate. I mean, I was going through chemo. I had my surgeries. Joe said, I'm going to talk to a former colleague, a former classmate of mine. She was a senator. She's a senator here in Connecticut, just a state senator. And I'm going to talk to her about the science you uncovered and about your treatment, what it has done as far as quality of life and how you can die from this disease. And nobody seems to care. And so that's how, Deborah, we started going the legislative route. And it's because my healthcare providers refused to even, and again, they weren't rude per se. It was just a matter of fact, nah, we're not going to do that, Nancy. It's not the standard of protocol. You miss a few. Well, they're missing mine. I said, we're not missing yours. I bet you'd have a different thought if it was your cancer, if you had the stage 3C breast cancer, if you had less than a 49% chance of surviving 5 years, I bet you'd have a different story.
Well, it's amazing that you bring this up, and it's never my desire as an integrative practitioner bash traditional medicine. There's
Correct.
A lot that it has to offer. But what I talk to my husband about this all the time to try to get the language down so that I can explain it in a way that doesn't sound like I'm bashing it. Being a nurse, sometimes I don't have the perspective of someone who's a non-medical person. And I've always been kind of one of those bossy ICU nurses. And so I have a different relationship with doctors. that being said, I find it very challenging. I mean, I've worked at leading teaching institutions where, doctors and nurses work more like in partnership than, me
Yes.
Tarzan, you Jane system, which is usually what I call it. And yet, even as a patient, it has been very hard for me to advocate for myself and say, no, this is not right. I mean, I told you before the show the other day, I had to walk out of a testing because they were like, well, the doctor's, he's not going to listen to you and he's just going to yell at you. I'm like, I don't accept that. And I left.
Yes.
Big schedule, and I left. I'm always very sensitive about that. But you're bringing up so many things. My husband often, he's not a medical person, but sometimes we'll leave and, they'll give you all the statistics about recurrence and breast cancer and this treatment and that test. And we'll leave and he'll be like, I feel like I just left a bookie's office.
Yeah.
And that's how it can feel that, when doctors are giving you these statistics, or not, like you've so well talked about, the reasons they give you information or don't are often driven by so many other things besides your individual, personalized, unique experience with them. And yet we live in a world where we've been taught from the days of Marcus Welby that doctor knows best. And I think that people tend to give up their power because, well, the doctor said it, or the doctor told me to take it, or the doctor didn't think this was important. And we've been trained that that's enough. And as you're very well bringing up, that's not enough. One doctor may think it's important, and then the next one may do something completely different. You always have to be your own advocate.
You do. And that's a challenge to many of us. I mean, we're all busy, but I will tell you, Deborah, and I know you get it because, first of all, you are a breast cancer, quote unquote, trying to survive this disease. I always say that about me.
Right.
And understand what it's like. I mean, honestly, at one of my darkest times of my life, and now, again, it wasn't that they were rude, but it was really, honestly, careless. Health careless. They really did not care about my plight, that I ended up with this late stage disease. And so I kept thinking, I wonder if they really think early detection matters. We've been hearing about that forever. And if they really believed it, each of those doctors, my 6 doctors, be outraged what happened to me? Wouldn't they be outraged? It's in the literature. Wouldn't be for decades? Wouldn't they be outraged that it's not only hard to see a cancer, but it's a risk factor for breast cancer? But they were not. I was outraged. My husband was outraged. The literature drove us to our legislators in Connecticut, and after lots of drama with the Physician Trade Organization, the College of Radiology in Connecticut, testifying against giving information that's already in my file that I never saw to the woman who has it so that she can be the leading advocate for her breast health and talk to her doctors about added screening. Because what I uncovered, and still is true today, as I said, about 40% of women have dense tissue. There's 4 categories from fatty to scattered, which is not considered dense. That's called A's and B's. And the C's and D's is heterogeneously dense and extremely dense, which I had. Mm-hmm. About 40% of women have the C and the D as far as their breast tissue. And again, you can't see the cancer. It's masked because the tissue is white, and so is the cancer on an X-ray. And so when I got that information and knew that we should get it to the patient, I did it not only certainly for me, I mean, I still have a good breast, but I did it because I knew there were going to be women after me that would be just like me, devastated that they were denied equal access to an early diagnosis. I felt betrayed by my medical community.
That's so powerful. And there's 2 things, because I definitely want to talk about your advocacy, because that's really something you've brought to light. But there's 2 things that you just said that I really want to emphasize. And you've said it a couple times, but I really want our listeners to hear this loud and clear. Having dense breast is a risk factor for breast cancer. That's a game changer. Seriously, that's a game changer. I remember the first time I heard you talk, you said that having dense breast was an equal risk to your possibility of having breast cancer as the BRCA1, BRCA2 gene that everyone's talking about, the genetic testing that they do. That is such a powerful statement, because most people who are at all concerned about breast cancer have heard about, BRCA1 testing and the BRCA gene testing. And this is as equal a risk factor, if not more so. And something that's more accessible in terms of information. You just ask your doctor, what is my breast density? Because if you've ever had a mammogram, they have that information. That's what you're saying. They have this information. They are not telling you for a number of other reasons. And I really
it's
explore that.
Deborah, you bring this up because when we started asking, requesting this, our first law in Connecticut to disclose or report dense tissue to the patient as part of her mammogram report, the doctors were saying, well, all she has to do is ask for it and we'll give it to her. Well, she doesn't even know she has to ask for it. I never heard the term dense breast tissue until after I was slammed in front of a wall with a late stage diagnosis. So how would women even know to ask for something you didn't even know you needed to ask for? And so once we got our first state in 2009, it was a terrible slog to the finish line. I thought, we have two organizations, Are You Dense and Are You Dense Advocacy, and we're on Facebook and Twitter. I hope the listeners join us and follow us, because we do have a lot of important information, a lot of good resources that are really patient friendly that we give out to patients.
And supporting your advocacy. I mean, if there's one thing that listeners need to know is that we're talking about your access to information.
Yes.
Because you may be in one of those states where it's not a law that the doctors need to tell you.
Right.
So this is about your advocacy. And until you advocate for it, obviously it's not going to be offered.
Yes. So I just want to digress for a moment, because I want to tell you, because I know that you're into functional medicine and how important it is, and I want to tell you a little story about how I fired my first oncologist. You're going to love this, so I'll try to get this quickly. So before I was diagnosed, again, I exercised, I ran, I took supplements, certain things that I thought were important as I studied information about keeping healthy, did my breast exam, did my yearly mammogram, went for my yearly checkup, wellness visit, the whole bit. Okay. When I was diagnosed, I had maybe a list of maybe 6 or 7 supplements that I was taking. Vitamin C, vitamin E, CoQ10. At the time, I was only 50, so I wasn't taking calcium and vitamin D. But anyway, when I met with my oncologist, my breast surgeon recommended a local oncologist, and we were going to go over my treatment, my protocol for my stage 3C breast cancer. When he got the list of my supplements, he looked at them and he said, well, just like this. And he almost threw the paper at me. Now I'm like, are you kidding me? This is really pretty. This is bad. This is not a salesperson. He said, well, you're not going to be taking these. So I said to him, why? Well, we don't allow, who's we? I don't know, you and God? We don't allow women to take supplements when they're going through chemo. Oh, you don't? Could we go through the list and tell me why? He didn't even know why, but he just said we don't allow women to take supplements. So anyway, my husband was with me. So we're walking in the car. He looks at me and says, looks like you're not going to go there, are you? I said, nope. So I wrote him a little note, nice note. Dear Dr. So-and-so, thank you very much. However, basically you're fired. I didn't say it like that, but Joe, my husband, started looking for another oncologist because I needed it's chemo. I knew that I was going to go for chemo, even though we did look at other treatments that were non-chemotherapy, but I felt in my heart I needed to go that route because of my late stage diagnosis. And so Joe found an oncologist, a real medical doctor, who was practicing in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is about an hour and 20 minutes from here. Same protocol. Joe talked to him on the phone. Now this is the difference. This is the difference, Deborah. I went to see him. I had my supplement list. He went through, he said, all right, Nancy, Q10, perfect, because, chemo could be harsh on your intestines. He goes, I don't want you taking this E. I'm going to give you something else. As far as this, we're going to stop that, but I'm going to give you this. So I looked at him and I was thinking, this is like a Match.com for breasts. I mean, where have you been all my life? This is the kind of doctor. Right. Plus, he recommended I do acupuncture for nauseousness, which I did, to reduce nauseousness, I should say. So the difference is again, it was the same chemotherapy, adriamycin, Cytoxan, Taxol, Taxotere. However, the way he was treating me, he respected me as a person. Absolutely. It wasn't like he was throwing something at me and just blatantly saying, well, we don't allow this. Well, who's we? Right. Who are you? Right. And I said, I've listened to my docs for the last, 11 years. You think I'm going to start listening to them now? I've learned not to listen to them because I ended with a late stage diagnosis following every single rule that we, whoever we are, made up.
My last doctor said to me, and this is after I'd been the victim of medical malpractice by another doctor many years ago. And so when I go into doctors now, it's like, this is who I am. This is my medical history. This is what I expect of you. And he said, he was a great doctor. He treated me through my breast cancer. And he's like, you make me a little nervous one day when he was walking out of the room. And he left, and my husband looked at me, and I was like, good, keep him on his toes. I mean, this is a really great example of the fact that I just think that people think that they can abdicate and turn everything over to the doctor. But doctors are different. Just like you have good hairdressers and bad hairdressers, you have good doctors and bad doctors, or doctors that you don't even click with. He said, if a doctor tells you, I've really extensively researched nutrition and supplements, and for this reason, I think this is good and maybe this isn't indicated. Yeah. That's a very different message than I've never studied it, I don't know, and I'm not comfortable with it, so no. Those are two different messages. And once again, being your own advocate, which is all of these things. It's learning to ask the questions. If a doctor treats you rudely, being willing to walk away and find somebody else. Find somebody that matches your beliefs, that is willing to work with you, to explain things with you. I went with my plastic surgeon because the first time I saw him, he spent 3.5 hours with me explaining everything instead of 10 minutes. These are the kind of things, it's not I always tell people in terms of being an integrative practitioner, it's not either or, it's finding the best of both. And what you're talking about with this second doctor that you saw was finding the best of both. Somebody that you could trust in terms of the very traditional, frightening treatment that we all have to face when you're
exactly. And when I would run into because he's a local doctor, my fired oncologist, he'd see me and say, how you doing? And I would say to my other doctor, he thinks you're probably killing me. I said, well, I'm taking supplements. We worked it out with my doctor, and there's certain things, I was trying to educate him. I said to my real oncologist, he probably thinks you're killing me with the damn supplements.
Well, it's interesting that those...
ridiculous. Oh, golly.
They can be in such a close geographic proximity and be so different. But as I always tell people, get a second opinion, get a third opinion. It's like find somebody that's going to work with you that you feel respected, because this is a long haul kind of thing. And it doesn't stop the day you finish chemo because it's the rest of your life.
It's so hard though and challenging because you know how life can be so busy.
Right, exactly.
You have kids and families and work and this and that and bills and you're just, your head is spinning, and then you're thinking, then I got to go on another second opinion. I got to go take time off from work. Am I going to get paid? I mean, it's a huge challenge, and I understand that. It's agonizing for some people. I've been, I looked at this, while it was a very bad, breast cancer late stage, I always try to say to myself, listen, Nancy, we have to count our blessings, and let's think of some blessings. One, I had a job that I actually had some time I could take. I worked throughout my whole chemo, but I did have, on the Fridays when I had my chemo, I had it every other week. I was, I was able to take the time off from work and still get paid. I had great insurance. I could actually go to another doctor or have a second opinion.
Right.
I had a good insurance plan where I was able to have my medication, mostly paid for my my Arimidex or my AI that I'm still on. I always thought it was important for me to count my blessings, to think about I had a great family, a good marriage, good family, good husband. There were all these things. Yes, I was facing a bad disease, and yes, I could die from this disease, but boy, am I damn really blessed for a lot of things. And I thought that was important for me, because you can go down this rabbit hole and really get pretty depressed if you don't do that.
Oh, absolutely. And all of those things, I don't believe all of the things that you mentioned should be options, but they are in this country. One of the other things that's a very real issue is that in our country, your health insurance is often tied to your job. And if you're going through treatment, you oftentimes lose your job because you can't work. It's just a ridiculous circle that, you can get caught in. We have a few minutes. I want to be really respectful of your time.
Okay.
And I really want to have the conversation about your advocacy, because I really believe, well, for one thing, I'd like to say, why is it that you think that it has been so difficult to get this to the point where providers are getting this information to women, and I know that that's what led you to your advocacy, but it's actually at the point where you've gotten laws passed in so many states. And why is it that we have to go to that level to get this information?
Well, I think in the beginning, I think for the most part, there's an arrogance to the profession in many respects. Like, who am I to tell my doctor? It's changed. Thank you. This is not my grandmother's doctors anymore, or my mother's doctors. I think that the newer doctors that are coming in, although I had some old ones that were fabulous, understand that people want information. They want transparency. They want you to be honest. Don't sugarcoat things. I don't want anybody to say, "Oh, you're going to be fine." I know don't say I'm going to be fine. You don't know if I'm going to be fine. Give me the data. Give me the information. I can find out, and I'll do my best to keep healthy and to, again, survive this disease. So I think the number one thing was they were so protective of mammograms that that a lot of the folks in the healthcare, and these were mostly doctors. I'm not saying the nurses were our best friends. I love the radiation technology, the rad techs, the mammo techs, ultrasound techs are phenomenal. Sonographers, phenomenal. It was basically the profession of kind of insulated arrogance. I don't want to let people know mammograms are not really that great for some women. So there was a lot of secret.
Why is that? Why are they so protective of the mammogram? Is it just that it's the only thing they have to offer? Or why is that?
Well, probably in some respect, and for some it's their bread and butter. Again, I'm not here to disparage mammograms. I think certainly 3D is a better mammogram than a 2D. I would start there, but still there's so much research that even 3D is still, it's great. It reduces callbacks, but it's still challenging to find cancer in the dense breast. So if you're a woman who is going for screening for one reason, which why else would you go, is in the unlikely event you have breast cancer, it's found early, you really want to make sure that you're doing all you can to get that outcome. It's a very secret society in some respect. And I have stories of being yelled at by doctors, bullied, "Oh, you're the one who's making us do all that extra work." Me, can you believe this? In my spare bedroom, I'm doing all this. But here we are today, Deborah. And again, going back, we've had a lot of phenomenal doctors that have come to our defense that were pioneers in this field. Certainly not the norm, the exception, but even the doctors in Connecticut that were totally against what we were doing. After we passed our legislation and they started giving ultrasounds to women with dense breasts, or MRs, depending on the risk of the patient, that they were finding nearly doubling the number of invasive, the killing kind of cancers. And so what was in the science for decades has played out right now in the examining room, and that's exactly what I wanted to happen. I wanted women to have an opportunity to have dialogue, discussion with their doctor about what their personalized screening should be. And if they have dense breasts, having a mammogram alone is not sufficient. That's the bottom line. Again, from one state in Connecticut in 2009, we just passed our 35th. We will be on to 36. Illinois is heading to the governor's desk soon. And again, I don't go looking for women. I don't go soliciting, "Oh, I need somebody." Women find me through a Google search. Most of the women that find me, the greater majority, are women who are consumers of mammography. And they are just shocked, startled when they end up with a cancer that was missed, delayed in advance. They end up finding out they have dense tissue. They do a Google search, and guess who they find? Me. So I've worked all across this nation advocating alongside women to get this information. And we still, even in 2018, have opposition to these laws or these bills.
And let's be very clear, what you're advocating for is not some esoteric rocket science. You're advocating for legislation that women be told they have dense breast, which is a known measure. If you've ever had a mammogram, that is a standard assessment that is reported on the standard report that a doctor gets. Here's the mammogram results. Here is the percentage of breast density, or grading, as you called it.
So we don't see it, though. Yes.
Your advocacy is simply that women be told that information. You're not advocating anything, to change the rocket science of the profession. It's that women be told.
No. Yes, exactly right. And what I really prefer that every woman knows whether she has fatty breasts, scattered breasts, heterogeneously dense breasts, or extremely dense breasts. So that her breast tissue composition, we have about 9 or 10 states that do that tell women if they have what their breast tissue composition is. So a woman could monitor her own breast health. And if she moves to another state or goes across the road to another imaging facility, she knows what she's talking about. Right. And then having these discussions with their doctors about what the impact means. What does dense tissue? And I have women who've come to me and said, yeah, I heard I had dense tissue, but I don't know what that meant. No one ever told me what it meant. They would just say, oh, by the way, you have dense tissue. Well, what good is that? I mean, I recognize, Deborah, that these laws aren't certainly the be-all and end-all. What we want them to do is be the impetus for conversations and discussion and dialogue between patient and provider.
And once again, going back to what we were saying, if your doctor happens to be one who's not willing to have that conversation or who is uninformed about this whole issue, then you need to find someone else.
Yeah, here's a word of warning. When you go to a doctor, whether it's female or male, whether a doctor says to you, oh, everybody has dense breasts, you just had your mammogram, you're going to be fine, run to the hills.
Right.
How does she or he know that? And I always say to women, if a doctor says that to you, here's what you need to say. Can you tell me how confident you are that there isn't a hidden cancer within the density of my breast? And let's see what the stumbling you're going to get out of that person's mouth.
Right. Because that's the thing. I remember the first time I talked to you, I don't want to misstate this, but the reasons that a doctor may not tell you have something to do with what they perceive to be their legal ramifications if a problem develops. So the reasons that they may or may not be informed aren't necessarily about your individual care.
True.
There's many masters that they're dancing to. And one of them is, well, if I tell her and there's a problem, then I'm going to be responsible for the follow-up. And then, there's a whole thinking process that most people don't realize is
and you know what? That's absolutely incorrect, because in our legislation, the standard of practice is you give women information as part of her mammography report about dense tissue, with a little 2 or 3 sentences that go with it. Talk to your doctors about your personal screening, or dense tissue can hide cancers, or dense tissue is could be a risk for breast cancer, whatever. There's also this provision that the obligation of the facility or the breast center is to provide notice to the patient. It's not to then, if something happens and so I think it's more protection. You're giving notice, you're giving information, you're giving something that could make her have a missed cancer. So to me, it's only going to help with the finding of cancers, with the conversations, with the informed consent, as opposed to just not even telling them and burying your head in the sand and pretending it's going to be all right.
Exactly. I mean, that may be what every woman wants to hear, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true, unfortunately.
Yeah. And we have, I'm going to just call your attention. So our 2 websites, areyoudence.org and areyoudенceadvocacy.org. Our advocacy site has a picture of the United States map. It has links to all the state laws. We also have a handy guide that one pager. You can know how many, who has the laws, what type of laws they have, who doesn't have laws. Some of these laws have sunset clauses. That's also indicated. If you hit on your state, you'll find out what your law looks like. If your state is white, it means you don't have any action going on at all. On our Are You Dense site, we have brochures in Spanish, English, Japanese, French. We also have a handy guide to screening options for dense breasts, all the different types of technologies and what the yield is for cancer, and what some of the other considerations, like if you don't, like radiation or having an injection, those are all included in a one page with another page of tons of research.
I mean, that's great to hear, because as we conclude our interview, I was going to ask you what the important steps are that women can take. And really the most important step, reflecting on what you're saying, is just start educating yourself. And you may have to, have these handouts and brochures and pamphlets on your person to give to your doctor. Yes. So the first place is to really understand where you are. And like you said, I was told years earlier that, oh, you have dense breasts, but I had no idea what that actually meant. there was no follow-up about what that indicated. It was like,
Exactly.
oh, okay, I have dense breast.
What does that mean? So you really, and again, I don't want any woman to get all crazy and mental and say, oh my God, blah, blah. But be smart about your breast health. Know your breast tissue composition. Know that the purpose of breast screening, and have those conversations. I think you're going to find out, because now, since we have, even though, we're going to have 36 laws, you'll find that there's more and more women who know a lot more now. We know that through our national survey that we just did. All our results aren't in yet, but compared to what women knew about 6 or 7 years ago, it's amazing the impact of RU Dense and RU Dense advocacy. And again, I look at that. I knew, because it was in the literature, that this was something women needed to have, and I wanted to take it from the literature into the examining room. And seeing that my doctors did not want being any a part of that, I said the only way, and Joe and I knew, is through legislation. We have a federal bill that we also reintroduced. You can go on RU Dense Advocacy, hit federal bill. You could be writing your legislators in about not even 5 minutes. Just put your zip code in, and there's a template for a letter that can go to your Senate and your House member in DC. And we're also working with the FDA on changes to the MQSA, which is the Mammography Quality Standards Act regulation, so that every woman, no matter if she lived in Hawaii or Montana, will have information about her breast tissue. And again, driving her to have conversations about her personal screening surveillance.
Yes, absolutely. Well, in closing, one line that I heard you say the first time I ever heard you presented with a colleague, but I know one of you said it. And I just think that it's the most powerful way of summing it up, which is we need to change the conversation, because doctors, they've told me having a bilateral mastectomy, oh, did you have a yearly mammogram? And I'm like, huh? They just do it automatically. I mean, they're following, in some ways, I don't want to simplify this or be insulting, they're following a checklist. Did you recommend your colonoscopy after 50 and your mammogram? You said something that was so powerful, which is we need to change the conversation from have you had your yearly mammogram to have you had your yearly breast exam. Exactly. Because, as you said, if you've got dense breast, mammogram is not indicated. If you have implants, mammogram is not, the best exam to have. We definitely need to be regularly examining ourselves, and we need to be proactive in that. But we need to change that conversation. It's not a yearly mammogram; it's a yearly breast exam.
Yeah, breast screening, your yearly, yeah, exactly. When you think about it, we screen for breast cancer. It's really a breast cancer screening.
Right.
You're screening for breast cancer in the unlikely event you have it. We're not screening for mammogram. I don't know why we call it mammogram screening. It's kind of silly. Right. But we are, we're programmed to think that. And again, I start with my yearly mammogram. I do with 3D now. And then in 6 months, I have an ultrasound. The following year, I'll get an MR. So I alternate my MR with my 3D. If you're getting an MR, you certainly don't need a 3D. 2 MR is the most sensitive tool. However, it's typically reserved for those at the highest risk, and there's an injection that goes with it, which may have some complications. So there's no perfect scenario, sadly, Deborah. And it's up to the patient to determine what certainly she wants for herself, which she believes is important for her, and then activate it, and then hopefully stay healthy, do what you can to keep healthy, and then make sure that you're having those conversations about what you need for your own breast screening surveillance.
And for our listeners, I want to say, because I was looking at your website last night in preparation for this, you have a whole page on there that talks about the different kind of tests to be done and the pros and cons of each one.
Yeah, it's a great tool.
So, the other thing is, like, if you go in and tell your doctor, I'm not going to do a mammogram, I mean, you shouldn't have to, but you then may have to say, I want a guided ultrasound. Unfortunately, they should be able to tell you, but you may have to back that up with, if you're not going to do a mammogram, what you are asking for.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this, in my experience, and I don't know if it's different where you live, but most facilities will not do any other test except mammogram first, unless the woman is very young and they not like in her 30s, and maybe she had a family history of breast cancer or a mutation. They may do the MRI without having the mammogram, but very rarely will you see somebody skip the mammogram. That's the standard, and it's challenging to change that. And again, I'm not here to change it. I'm here to, again, change the conversation so that women are empowered, not the doctor. The woman is empowered about her own breast tissue, and so she can advocate for what's best for her.
Yeah, unfortunately, like you said, doctors will say you have to have it or there's nothing else. And you've just got to be that squeaky wheel or bossy nurse or advocate like informed advocate. I mean, you've taken this, very frightening and overwhelming, as you said, depressing experience and become an international voice for empowering women. And I can't tell you how much I respect and admire you for that and really want to call that out for people because you've become an international voice to empower women.
Deborah, because this is personal, that's my motivation.
Exactly.
I know what it was. It's still like that at times. I am so outraged. And going back to my real career as a teacher and educator, kids with disabilities, giving them equal access to a quality education. I couldn't get equal access to an early diagnosis. Women with dense tissue couldn't, and no one really seemed to care. So this is why I'm motivated. But let me tell you something. I've worked with women all across this globe, and a lot of them in the States, who found me when they had a stage 3 or 4 at diagnosis, never missed a mammogram, and ended up dying from this disease. I am trying to prevent that. And it can be prevented by if screening matters, we better start looking at not just the mammogram, beyond the mammogram, and make it tailored to the individual patient's needs.
Right, exactly. Well, in closing, because I know you have to run, but please, once again, give your contact information and where people can either get more information or either contact you or your advocacy organizations. I want to end with that.
Well, thanks, Deborah. Thanks for having me. I wish you the best in your endeavor to educate women and men across this world, too. It takes a lot of time and energy to do what you're doing, too, and I think it's great. Again, the more you know is really important.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as you said, I feel a passion for this because I've been there as well. And there's just so much we need to know in order to advocate for ourselves and really get the care that we need and we deserve. I just so appreciate everything that you're doing. So once again, Dr. Cappello, Nancy, is the director and founder of RU Dense and RU Dense Advocacy. Those can both be found online. You can also contact me at mindbodynutritionrn.com. There'll be information and show notes referring back to everything that we've talked about today and the references, if that's going to be helpful for you in terms of accessing the information. So thank you so much. This has been wonderful. And I look forward to maybe having you on again.
Great. My weekend's beginning, not yours yet.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you, so my weekend's beginning.
Well, have fun.
Have fun. Good one. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. So in closing, I would like to make sure that I once again let you know that Dr. Cappello can be reached at RU Dense and RU Dense Advocacy Organization. She has a website and you can sign up and actually become active in the process yourself. All of the references that we've talked about will be listed in the show notes, which you can reach at mindbodynutritionrn.com/podcast. And you can also download a free e-guide talking about estrogen blocking medication, normal and expected side effects with those medications. You can sign up for a free consult. And I also would like to let you know that I'm going to be starting an integrative breast cancer recovery group. It's going to be an ongoing group for about 8 weeks. If you're interested in that, please drop me a line and I will put you on the VIP notification list. You can do that at radicalhealthrn@gmail.com. You can also send me any comments, feedback, or questions you might have at that same email address. Thanks so much for joining me today, and please remember to subscribe and comment on the podcast on iTunes. It helps in the whole iTunes rating world and helps my podcast get seen by more women. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening. If you have questions or feedback, you can reach Deborah at radicalhealthrn@gmail.com or her website, www.mindbodynutritionrn.com. You can also find us on Facebook under Boobs Aren't Worth Dying For. For future episodes, subscribe on iTunes, where you can also leave positive reviews. Until next time.